rejoignez la French Tech.
So let's get going to our second session. I know I'm really delighted to have these three folks right next to me.
Well, at least these two.
All of you, and so some I know better than others. But we are here right after this great session on AI and everything tech. We're going to be here more focused on business development. Now, actually, this ties very much so into tech. I mean, because frankly, a lot of businesses and a lot of businesses that are expanding and growing, they are in the tech sector, and including those that are landing here. Or that hopefully would be considering landing here. So just like Jean-Georges, I'm a member of the French Tech, right? So which is part of why we're here tonight. And one of the things from the business development angle we're very much looking at is it's expanding for French companies, is landing here, expanding here, and vice versa, right? Why should U.S. companies consider moving and expanding in France? Okay, so we'll cover a few topics here. I haven't prepared any slides or anything formal. The goal here is to be actually very informal, and we'll exchange, and we'll want to have for you to have the opportunity to bring up any questions anytime. If you have thoughts, ideas, suggestions, just raise your hands, and that way I'll see that you're covered. So let's start with a brief round of introductions. The three people we have here. I'm delighted that we have people who are currently startup founders, and we have someone who was and still works very much so with startups. So maybe we'll start with you, Tom. I know we're actually connected from SAS, where you were not very long ago, which is a local company.
I didn't survive very long there. But.
Yeah, well, it's a company that's, that used to be a startup, but that was actually in the 80s.
Actually, I was one of Dr. Goodnight's first customers at the state of North Carolina doing policy analytics. Yeah. And that was 45 years ago.
There you go.
So he was still in NC State at the time.
Right, but that's an example of a company that was actually based here, that was a startup, and that expanded pretty quickly internationally, including in France, where they have a presence. But let's go to the present and to you, Tom.
Okay.
I'd really love for. Okay.
Sure.
So apparently, let me actually give you this because everybody can hear better.
So my name is Tom Fisher. My family and I moved here about 2 years ago from Silicon Valley. I've been at great companies like SAS, like Oracle, like SuccessFactors, MapR, Qualcomm, IBM for 14 years. And my roles in those capacities have been, I've been a CTO 5 times and a CIO 4 times. Today, what I do is I left SAS and took some time and really started thinking about what I wanted to do. I enjoy venture studios. I'm not sure if they're familiar to you, but there are ways in which you incubate companies. You bring in subject matter experts. The panel before talked about that, but it's a critical part of the success of products is if you have subject matter experts that have core expertise, that they see an opportunity or product. We'll build that product for them. We'll take it to market for them. We'll build the ecosystem around it, as well as doing investment. So I've gotten into the investment side of things. I was telling Claire that one of the companies we're working with right now is a serial entrepreneur from France. I had worked with him, was an advisor to him. We grew his company, we sold it. And then he is now back trying to do another one. So intimately familiar with the challenges associated with bringing a company from France to the United States. When I was at IBM, I had a team of engineers in La Défense that I managed, and we expanded that footprint of engineers there because we found very, very highly skilled engineers that could really build great products. So I guess the bottom line is I have familiarity on both sides. I've done 4 startups. I wish I could say they were all successful. The first one was very successful, so successful we sold it twice. It was an Israeli startup. And then I took all that money, plowed it back into another startup, and it just bust. I learned more from the bust than I did from the successful one. And I stay, as Claire said, stay very active in the startup community, particularly now that I'm in North Carolina, trying to create that community, trying to bring dollars here for investment purposes because we need seed and early stage investors here. Later stage investors, trust me, the Silicon Valley guys, when you get successful like Pendo.io is here, they'll find you. They're always looking.
So let's move on to our next guest is Frdrica.
Hello,
Go ahead.
hello everyone. So I'm a co-founder and CEO of a company named LabVoice that we created about 3 years ago, based in RTP. So what do we do briefly? We build a voice assistant specifically tailored for scientific laboratories. So we know this space very well. We've been in this space for a long time. So we group all that knowledge into a voice assistant that's aware of all the processes of our customers. You put that into the lab. We can just help you go through these multi-step processes, help you go to the next stage, help you stay compliant, and help you capture the data on the stage real time when you're running your experiment with your gloves and everything you're busy doing. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing. My story a little bit. So I moved in RTP about 20 years ago. I heard saying it, but yeah, it's about 20 years ago already. Working for a big pharma in France, and you know those people, they just keep merging and selling each other. So at some stage, some side effects. And one of those was that we spin out and we created a service company in the US, and that's what attracted me back then. So moving from France in a very comfortable situation into this land of adventure and
20 years ago.
Exactly, 20 years ago. We're coming for 3 years, let's see what it lasts. And it was pretty exciting. So joined that, offering a ton of services to big pharma. And I was more in charge of the software part. But what was exciting is that this area and even this country, I would say, the entrepreneurial spirit rapidly fires. And if you build something interesting, they find you. That's what happened. We developed kind of very interesting piece of software that attracted the key leader of the market. And what happened, they found me. They extract us from the company. We are on second spin out. And this time I joined a real software company. And we grew from there. So it was interesting. Up until we got acquired again. And the irony of it was by a French company. So I thought that was the end of my journey. But I think I forgot that during all these very exciting years, I lost my appetite for big company and corporate. And this one was probably too big. So that's why 2 or 3 years ago we said, that's enough. Let's see what you can do. And that's how LabVoice is born.
Great. Clement, please.
Hi everyone. So my name is Clement. I'm the baby of the band.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm French and I'm currently the Chief Operation Officer and co-founder of a biotech startup. The name is Clement Sciences. And what we do is biomolecules that are basically reagents, or you can call them ingredients for other biotech, but we do them in plants. And so there are several new generation of companies in fields such as cellular agriculture, such as cell and gene therapy, that do need those reagents, but can't find them in high enough quantities or in the good price range, and we can provide them those. So I'm French, but I'm a bit an imposter here because the company started in Belgium. We were there with my wife, with the CEO and the scientist of the company. But I can really relate to the exchanges you can have between almost friends, let's say friends for tonight. I hope there are no Belgium in the room. And the US. The company has been created 2 years ago. And we moved to the States 6 months ago, so I'm really the baby and being here. And yeah, I think I've said what we are doing. The installation, I'm sure we'll have more time and to discuss those for both the company and like the personal life. So, well, shorter, but this is who I am.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. So a few things I'd like to add because I think it's interesting. So, and we'll probably get to that later. But what you're doing with plants, it's actually you know, in my company there's a lot of that, you know, things around ag tech. So it's really interesting that you're bringing that and focusing on that. And Frédéric also should mention that you're a member of our French Tech Raleigh organization as well. So member of the team. Thank you. As to Tom, one thing I just want to share is you've been in many places around in the U.S. So California.
Yeah, I'm really old.
No, that's not what I meant. But I mean,
It's okay.
It's California. It's
Old to baby.
Yeah, exactly.
well, that's it. So yeah, one thing's let's start with that, and I know we'll discuss very many different topics and subjects. And again, everybody, if you have a question, you know, raise your hand. But this is all related though with North Carolina being a strong leader in the field of technology, right? So one of the things I'm thinking about, do you see this, what are your predictions? And I know that was brought earlier, when you look at 2022, do you see more, you know, growth and more French companies coming in? You know, what do you see as the key trends? And whichever of you wants to start, I'll give you the chance to start. Let's go ahead.
So the prediction, we definitely see a lot of companies coming. We are having lab space and office space in a place that is called the Launch Lab, so really for startup. The place opened like 2 or 3 months ago, and we see all the suits that are available like booked. It's really quick. It's impressive how fast it goes. We kind of decided to move to the US without exactly knowing where. So we had like California, some people talked about like Boston, some other Texas. We chose here for many reasons. And by the time we started like preparing the move to now, we've heard about like big companies such as Apple opening like offices, a lot of other ones. So it's definitely like a impressive dynamic, especially coming from a small country like Belgium, France.
Yeah, growth, we see it, I think, already. We see it every day. So is this region going to grow? Yeah, I think we have the answer. Now, more French company, well, that's what we're trying to do at French Tech and others, I think. I think depending where your company operates, you really want to consider this region. If you're in biotech or software, you must look at it. Biotech and software, that's where I've been working for 20 years now. And this is the best compromise. Biotech, you can go Boston, but it's way expensive now. Software, I'm sure you dream of going to Silicon Valley. And maybe it's where you go, you should go. But opening your company now in Silicon Valley, wow. That's tough to operate. That's tough to go attract talent in Silicon Valley nowadays. Wow, you can have a hard time. That's why here was so great as well. You know, here you really can find a lot of talent as well in software. Let's see if Google and Apple is bringing more competition than anything, but definitely. So yeah, I hope we're going to see more French companies. We're doing everything to ensure, at least make sure they got that on their agenda and check it out because they should.
I would say that coming out of Silicon Valley, the valley has an ecosystem that's built around it, and it's great universities. The weather is amazing because it's California, and this willingness to take a lot of risk. If you look at companies like Google, I mean, a little small story. I was the chief technology officer at a company called eBay. You're probably familiar with that one. But if you've sold anything or bought anything, most people at one point or another bought it on eBay. And there were 2 guys from Stanford that came into my office to talk about how they were going to improve search. And they were working out of their one of the mother's garages. And, it was Larry Page and Sergey. It was Google. They were 2 guys in a garage, literally. What I hope for in North Carolina is that we can recreate that magic. And we certainly have the skills, we certainly have the talent. And I see Google coming here, and I see Microsoft has landed here, Amazon is here. There's a whole host of companies that are coming here, and it's because of the skill sets that are here. Now, I also hope they imbue in this area a culture of it's okay to leave, go try something else, and come back. I worked at Oracle for 6 or 7 years. I was the CIO for the cloud there, and I ran all of their managed cloud services as well. And one of the things that I loved about Larry, there were a lot of things that I hate about him, but one of the things that I loved about him was that he had what he called a 3-strike rule. You could come back and forth to Oracle without any questions 3 times because he wanted you to lead. There's a guy named Mark Benioff that was a direct report to Larry, and Larry encouraged him to start Salesforce. Larry put up the first money to get him into Salesforce. And I hope that we can find people like that come with that open attitude because I think that's crucial. The thing that's missing here in my mind is we have very limited early stage financing. And that's something that the state can help to improve upon. Because like I said, when you get into the later stages, the big funds will find you, especially if you have rapid success. So, from a regional area, I mean, I thought you were Southern. You just spoke with a different accent.
Exactly.
I mean, but the one thing that I was born and raised in North Carolina, went to school here. So for me, coming back, it was no big deal. I have 5 brothers and sisters that live in Charlotte. But the thing that this area has, there's an openness and a friendliness and that wraps around this particular region. And I hope that we'll be able to continue to keep that. I love walking down the street and waving at people I don't know. I mean, in California, usually the wave was a single finger, right?
Maybe I can just add something on the early stage funding from my own experience. So when we started raising money for Tiamat, it was 1.5 years ago, no, 1 year ago. We were in France, Belgium. We were pregnant, so my wife was 3 months pregnant, and it was the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And we are first-time entrepreneurs, so the odds were really low, but we made it somehow. And I think we've kind of experimented the transition because we wanted to have US investors. It was kind of the plan for us to have this opportunity at least. We've really lived live the change of mindsets, maybe of some Californian-based VC who realized that there was a whole world
outside of California,
valley, and with a lot of companies working remotely, out of the blue they could expand their investment and their interest. So I'm pretty confident because we lived it. We came from nowhere, geographically and also from our own experience. I'm pretty confident that the landscape of early stage financing is going to evolve a lot. And we've seen it now that we are a bit more advanced. There are a lot of over the past year of accelerators and early stage venture that are contacting us from everywhere around the world, and the location matters a bit less to them than maybe what used to be. So I think there is definitely a new generation, and once you can raise the same amount of money here in California, in France or in Belgium, then you want to be in a place where you can do more out of this money. And there is no comparison between North Carolina.
I would agree with you because I think that COVID
has brought that on, right? I noticed for me, I mean, I'm invested in Manhattan Beach, California. I just went there for the first time yesterday. But everything else we did on Zoom. Everything else we've done on Zoom. And I think that the benefit is you can locate here now, and if you can attract the attention of the investors, and they're more open to it. Look, let's face it, there's so much capital out there that has to get used. One of the challenges that I had with the startups that we're creating is they want to give us $50 million. And I don't need $50 million. And I'm not going to give up that much of the ownership of the company. So, we'll raise it through crowdfunding or WeFunder or something like that, rather than have to go through that whole, I mean, to be handed a $10 million check when you're 10 people, that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, I think you align with my thinking that tech and startups coming here is here to stay and here to stay for a while, and definitely learning from, I think, the example of California, to name just that one. And I think that matches. I was looking for a little bit of data. We're all a company where it's all about data, and for instance, right now there's 362 startups in the Triangle at this point, and and the other thing is, from NC Tech. I don't know if you're familiar with the NC Tech Association, but there are more than 21,000 tech establishments in North Carolina. No, not here specifically, but that was just recently. Any question from anyone here?
Mr. Fisher, actually, when you mentioned
Who's that?
when you mentioned about the funding, I know somebody that's going through exactly that right now. And actually, they told me that the company they're trying to get funding from, it's not even 50 million, it's 400 million. For them, it's not worth it to do less than that. And they're only looking for about $5 million bridge loan. And that's exactly, as soon as he says that, yes, I've seen that.
Well, that just tells me that it's a very mature entrepreneur, because they know what they need and they know the increments in which they want to grow. Too often, I mean, I was in one. The last startup I did was a complete disaster. It was a company called MapR, if you're not familiar with it, Hadoop technology. I was the chief technology officer there. We raised $280 million. We got our revenues up to $110 million. And then we made the stupid decision to get rid of the CEO and bring in a founder, and he took us right back down to 40 million and crashed and burned. And all of the investors lost money. But when you look at their balance sheet, it was a nit. It was nothing compared to the $1 billion+ funds that they were representing. They just took the write-off and moved on. So I understand it, and that company is doing the right thing. They've analyzed, they've looked at it. The one thing that I will say is when you're in this business, and you probably know this already, don't raise money when you need it. Raise money when you don't need it, right? So if you do $5 million and then a year later you go out for another 5 or 10, that's easier than taking 400. You're going to have all kinds of people all over you about where's the money going, and they will quote unquote help you.
Yeah, they're also going to take a huge chunk of your management.
Huge chunk, especially in the first round. No way.
That's why another company I know is basically having that problem, because they don't want to give up any management, and so basically it's like they're kind of stuck, and we're trying to help them.
Look, I've been a VC. I've been on the other side of the table. I'm a limited partner in 3 different venture funds right now, and one thing that I have learned is don't be greedy. What you really need to do is you need to be able to leave plenty of equity to reward and recognize not just the leadership, but the key contributors in the company. I had a friend yesterday, a company went public called Braze. It was a marketing tool. And their best sales rep, who happens to be my son's best friend, vested $6 million as a salesperson in shares from the company. I mean, that's the kind of success that you want to create. You want that kind of thing. And the only way they were able to do it is because they retained a lot of the ownership of the company throughout the fundraising process.
Thank you. So let's move along a little bit, and we've talked, leadership and technology. Let's talk a little bit about international business, development and expanding your business internationally. So I know you, you mentioned a little bit, you moved here. Can you maybe expand a little bit more about how you made that decision, what prompted you? And
many factors. First of all, on a personal level, it's cool just having this opportunity, and it's still crazy. I still don't realize plenty. But there are some So we want to be a global company. We have global clients, and there is a demand everywhere. We see more and more that there is an interest in having some local production facilities. So it was to us a good try to start with 2 locations. The different cultures that you can have in work, this is something that we haven't planned ahead, but that we really like today. Take the best of both and make your own way of working that take this inspiration. We also have some advantages that we can take in both parts. For instance, as a biotech company, it's easier to play with IP on the R&D side. In Europe, you have a bit less freedom for that. And on the other hand, the certification process are quicker in the US. So we can take the best of both worlds, apply it to what we are doing, and then move around quicker. So definitely a lot of opportunities that come from this diversity of system. For the business side, let's meet again in a year and I'll tell you more, hopefully. But once again, we have interest from clients, I'd say really all over the world. So it's good for us to think about how we split the production and having 2 sites already in the making. This is a good first, and this is really something that is reassuring of our future partners.
Clement, when you made the decision to come here, was it because there were other biotech companies in the area?
Yeah, the ecosystem was definitely in for us. So one of the first markets we are aiming at is what we call the cellular agriculture field.
Yeah.
So you have 100 or so companies that are making real meat in labs using cell culture technology. So they take one cell and they can multiply it and up to having a steak, a piece of chicken, or something like that. And they do need a lot of those growth factors. I did the calculation, so more than 40% of the company when we started were based in the US, most of them in California, but we decided to come here. So strong interest in being present in the US, to be closer, to start having discussion. We have 2 of them that are like our neighbor today, so we can just grab a coffee and go there and say, hey, look at the lab, see if we can grab some information. So yeah, definitely, like the ecosystem is great, and the opportunities that are coming with it.
Now, was your financing through U.S. funds?
Yeah, so the financing also went through the US. It was part of the deal with our first investor at the pre-seed stage to have a US company. So the US company bought the Belgian one, and we can operate the 2 of them, but the US company received the funding. This, I think, has been a great move because you have obviously more VC in the US, but you have some other opportunity with financing in Europe. I'm thinking of grants, a lot of them. So once again, you can play on and take the best of both sides, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Did your VC let you choose where you wanted to land the US?
She wanted us to go in California. I think it was easier for her to picture us raising money from there, and we say no. We said yes at first, and then we realized that being in San Francisco with 2 kids, maybe not the best things to do. And also at some point we realized, so we also saw the salary, the cost of hiring there, and we kind of freaked out. We realized that we would not raise more if we would go there, so it was kind of obvious. And the last thing that really kind of settled the move for North Carolina was the lab space we had there. So it was like a shared space. And we had one of our clients that were there, and during one of the calls I said, hey, how is the lab? And she said like, oh. I was like, She said, And so then we realized that it was so expensive for a space where you have to book 2 weeks in advance, like this centrifuge, and it's not clean. And on the other hand, here we had a lot of choices, so it was kind of
So related to that, was that based on you doing research and looking at, California and other places, or at the end of the day, how was it that you chose this? Were you doing your own research, or was it somebody who advised you and said, hey, consider North Carolina?
some research, some personal research, definitely, the knowledge of the field we were aiming at, and we do have a board member and advisor whose name is Ryan Betancourt. He's CEO of a pet food company and he's a strong advocate of North Carolina. So he moved from Berkeley to North Carolina. He's creating basically a biotech ecosystem here. And so he was really kind of like showing us what is good here without like forcing us to do anything, but it made a lot of sense to move there. So I'd say our personal research confirmed by this advisor.
Excellent, great, thank you. And well, how about you? I know it's been a while. You didn't that recently, but
Yeah. Yeah, but as far as we're concerned, our market is mostly US, Europe, and Asia. So US is where we started. Europe, Asia is tough to break. It's been in this market for a long time. It's a very interesting one, but it's more difficult. We're too early, too young for that. So Europe was more on our radar, and it turned out we're already there, and it accelerated pretty fast. And I think it's because of COVID as well. People now kind of appreciated we could run this business remotely and get them started remotely and sell remotely. So that helped us gig in Europe. Now as we grow, I hope we're going to be able to settle something out there and create a little bit of a culture of a global company. I always love that. It's interesting. So Europe has a different sensitivity and getting some people mixed and all together create a much better culture in the company. So I look forward to that. We're still a bit early for that.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
okay, cool. And so do you see as part of the appeal, there are lots of decisions that one has to make when you're looking at, expanding and moving somewhere in a foreign country or area. Did you look at, for instance, as the taxation of North Carolina compared to California
If your
and
company's
other
successful,
states?
you're going to pay a lot
You're gonna
more
pay.
in
Exactly.
taxes.
Absolutely not. We've maybe this is like the baby in a sense. I
Yeah,
don't know.
You are a
Yeah.
real kid.
We jumped at it. Like we are learning on the spot. There are a lot of things that I'm still discovering, like the health benefit system I'm getting out of it. It's quite a shock for me as a French. No such calculation. I guess we'll see where we are heading at. We do have some pretty good lawyers and accounting team that really help us avoid some big mistakes. But it is complicated. What I haven't foreseen at all is that, especially at early stage when like basically you are doing everything, having two companies in two different countries, it's really twice the work to do the same thing. So this, if I would know it, if I would have known it before, I think I would have done it too, but it was quite a shock, especially as a COO, so it was a big part of my job. A bit frustrating sometimes to spend more time like on tax things and on the company strategy but yeah, I've learned a lot, and it's totally worth it.
But if you don't do that right at the beginning, you pay for it.
Don't scare me.
Yeah, so there was a question in the audience here?
Yeah, Tom, you guys have talked a lot about kind of traditional startups, but what about consultants? How is the market here for consultants? Any words of wisdom on how to pursue that?
By consultants, I'm assuming companies that would hire you as a consultant to them. Yeah, I mean, I'm working, there's a company here called Syneos. So they're going through a significant digital transformation. I'm working with them. That work is available, and it's less of an issue. It's more a matter of matching your skills to the skills that are required by the company. Shadi can tell you, if they were going to hire me to be an AI engineer 10 years ago, I'd been great when I was writing eBay. But today, no way. So you have to work up into the higher level discussions in the role of what role you're most comfortable interacting with. Having been a CIO so many times and CTO so many times, a lot of times great companies want that outside perspective, and they want somebody who's going to say stuff that, the expression in the U.S. is blowing smoke up somebody's ass. That doesn't. I can tell you, coming out of Silicon Valley, that does not work. They want unfettered truth, but they want that based on data and based on experience, and that's something that a consultant can bring.
Sure, absolutely. So let's move on to another question. So we talked about you landing here. Let's think about if there are people, what would be the recommendations and the advice, and maybe that starts with you, Tom, for U.S. companies in North Carolina in particular, to go and consider moving and expanding in France? What would be the advice, the recommendation, and the benefits that you see for them?
Well, one thing so the venture, the size of venture in France is about the equivalent of Massachusetts in the U.S. The opportunity is for companies to start here. One of the companies that we actually started here and did the engineering in France, we had the resources based in Marseille because it was much lower cost than Paris. So if a company, I ran an engineering team. I said before when I was at IBM in La Défense, that team was more expensive when we did the stack cost than the engineers here in North Carolina. But they knew they were subject matter experts, and that was really crucial. So the reality is getting companies in the U.S., particularly high-tech companies, to look into France. We need to be able to express better what the skill sets that are readily available, and that particularly out of the universities, because if you notice, there's a lot of recruiting. I know Shadi and I experienced it at SAS. We bring in hundreds of interns a year because we need that fresh view, that fresh skill set. And I think that's something that France can do much better is market themselves on behalf of those university graduates with programs and support structures that will allow U.S. companies to look at France as an option. I mean, cost is one component of it. I know in my last job at Oracle, I had teams in France, and I had teams in, most of my staff was in India because of cost. But India is no longer as cost viable as it used to be. I mean, I must have had 20% turnover there, and it was because somebody got offered $10 more to leave. And without continuity, you've got a bigger problem. One of the things that SAS has done very well is created a culture where people want to work there. They want to stay there. And I would contend that would be much more of something that people in France would find more appealing is the anchor to work for a company that's not going to force them to move, or that's going to provide them with really challenging projects. I'm sure income is a critical part of it, but the impression that I have is that it's more about the challenge, particularly with this generation of engineers that are coming out.
Okay. You have a perspective, Frédéric?
No, I've never done that, so I'm coming from here, so I'm going to be biased. But yeah, it's interesting what you say. I would agree. The talent, especially on the tech world in France, is amazing. So we should better publicize that.
Yeah.
Because that's what the main reason you want to go there. Mm-hmm. You're going to find extremely good talent. The education on that tech is very, very,
very good.
But we don't publicize that enough.
Yeah.
I was hoping to hear cost too. I was hoping the cost of living is low in France, but you say it's not even a factor. So
well, I mean, look at Israel. Israel's an incredibly expensive place, but it's startup nation. I mean, all you have to do is walk down the street and you'll trip over a CEO who made $1 billion in the U.S. And that culture, that mindset, they advertise themselves as cybersecurity experts,
Yeah.
right? France needs to find that niche and go there.
So I will add, so to that point, it's absolutely true. I think France has a lot of work to do in that area, but that's part of why I have to say I think the French tech is doing some of that work.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware, for instance, I was just, I like to, again, to look at specific information. So there's really great opportunities, for instance, I believe, compared to 10, 20 years ago, I won't even be further out, but for US companies that want to go there, for one thing, to get a visa, for them to get approval to have a visa to start their business there, 4-year visa. There's a lot of things around that. Now, even for investors, I was reading about that. There's a minimum requirement of 300,000 euros, but there's also possibilities for investors as well. So it's really part of the strategy. But to your point, I think we need to extend.
Does France have what are we, angel investors? I mean, successful entrepreneurs who have decided we're going to plow money back into the ecosystem, because that's really crucial.
Yeah, so I think, and I can let if you want to chime on that. I think it's something that's happening. It didn't always used to be that way, but it is happening, and particularly because also you have a number of French startups that grew in the US. But yes, so it's happening.
Have you tried to raise money in France before raising?
Yes, we've tried everything. So we had no limitation in the we were more looking for a value match and of course like a knowledge of the field, because when you try to pitch a biotech startup to someone that doesn't know biotech, it's painful. There is, I think, a new generation of entrepreneurs in France, some pretty inspiring ones. There are also some successful ones that are starting to get back the money and invest in this new generation. For biotech, what I do know is that past like the B round or the C round, there is a gap. There are not enough funds, or maybe like a fear of the risk, and it makes it complicated. So, but it's really changing.
Is that unique to biotech, or is that for technology in general, or is that a general statement?
It's particularly true with biotech. I'm less aware for the rest, but there is a size effect. Like the amount of fund that is available is, of course, So but like I think it's changing for sure.
And I know there's a question here from Jean-Georges.
I just wanted to add a comment on this raising money in France. I created a bunch of startups in France. It's evolving, but the relationship between the French person and money is not evolving that much. So I've got money, I'm keeping it for myself, because if I show it, I'm going to be taxed on it. So it's not about really reinvesting. There's not enough incentive to reinvest your wealth into startups. I know quite a few people that were successful in startups and selling them. They buy apartments. Okay, so they would make their money on the startup, but they would not reinvest on a startup or believing the peers being able to do that.
See, the U.S. has established something called QSDS, which essentially says if I put $9 million into a startup, and the company grows to $100 million, then the first $90 million for me is not taxed. So we've created those kinds of programs, and certain, like I can tell you that is widely known in Silicon Valley, but when I talk to North Carolina investors, they go, I never heard of that. But it's the sophistication, it's the rules, and understanding them, and being able to take advantage of them to get more capital into these markets. I work with a company, Founders Fund, in Europe, and what they were doing was because of they knew all the rules around it. So we would look at their term sheets and go, what the hell does this mean? And they would have to go through and explain just exactly what you described. That here's the French regulations. If the company's valued at $65 million, government's going to come back and say, where's my money, right? So we had to create
valuation tables were very different. And then when they moved to the U.S., that's a complete pain in the ass because the valuation tables don't match what the U.S. investors are looking at. So it becomes even, and one thing about venture, it has to be frictionless. If you introduce friction, they'll take their money and go someplace else.
Well, I know we're running really at the time of the day, 8 p.m. But want to thank everybody for being here. Really appreciate it. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. Everybody's on LinkedIn. So yeah, thanks a lot and have a great week.